Surprisingly, over 90% of viewers haven't subscribed yet. If you're enjoying the content, hit that subscribe button. It motivates us to keep creating and helps us never miss an upload. I always thought real love sounded ordinary in the best way. Coffee spoons clinking, a sweater borrowed without asking, the calm of reading on the same couch while rain rode on the window. That was our house for years. Then praise started arriving addressed to someone else. The first time my wife Marina compared me to our friend's husband, I laughed it off. The second time, I laughed quieter. The third time came after Jenny's birthday dinner, when Russ ordered for the table and bragged about vineyards he'd only toured once. On the drive home, Marina sighed like a critic, leaving a disappointing matinee, and said, "He just knows how to lead, doesn't he?" I watched wipers carve dark arcs across the windshield and said nothing. I told myself not to take it personally. Admiration can be innocent. But admiration, when sharpened, becomes a measuring stick. The moment the stick turned into a spear arrived a week later, in our kitchen, lemons crowding the cutting board. She didn't even raise her voice. "Why can't you be more like Jenny's husband? He's more of a man than you." The sentence didn't explode. It clicked into place like a lock. I rinsed my hands until the water ran cold and said evenly, "You should have married him then." She blinked, surprised that I didn't argue or audition for the role she wanted. "Don't be dramatic," she said, setting the knife down as if we were merely choosing a different recipe. We slept in a silence that felt busy, like a factory running at night. I lay there counting all the tiny ways I had traded myself for approval. I remembered the version of me from early days. Not flashy, but steady, curious, proud of the quiet skills that keep a life standing. Somewhere along the way, I started measuring that man against louder ones. I realized I had been shrinking to fit an idea of strength that never suited me. Morning broke pale and cool, Marina dressed, humming a tune from a commercial. She pecked my cheek and floated out the door. I made toast I didn't want and looked at the drawer where we kept warranties and paperwork. Inside sat a letter I had written weeks ago in a burst of clarity I hadn't known what to do with. I read it again and felt my spine line up. Then I slid off my wedding ring. The slim circle carried a tiny scratch from an old clumsy moment, a memory that once made us laugh. I placed it on the letter and walked away before I started editing my boundaries. At work, I tried to build a presentation while my mind kept returning to the image of that ring resting like punctuation on the page. My phone buzzed. A text from Jenny. "Last night was so fun. Come by Sunday for a grill out." Under it, a message flickered from an unknown number. "Free for lunch?" Wink. I stared at it a long beat. I didn't recognize the number, but I recognized the tone. A little stone dropped into my gut. I put the phone face down and forced myself to finish the slide deck. I left early, told my boss it was a personal day, and walked the long route home past the river. Couples took photos under the willow trees. A dog lunged at ducks and then reconsidered. The world was unapologetically itself. I wanted that again. When I reached our building, I climbed the stairs and paused at the door, listening to the modest hush of our hallway. I pictured the table, the envelope, the ring. I pictured Marina's face when she saw them, and found that I didn't crave tears. I craved a conversation that didn't dodge. Dusk turned the kitchen lavender. I set a glass of water on the counter and waited. Marina's keys jingled in the lock. She swept in, all weekend energy and perfume, set her bag on the chair and thumbed through the mail. Then she saw it. The humming stopped. Her hand hovered over the ring as if heat rose from the metal. She slid the letter free and began to read. I watched her eyes move. While they traveled, our history flickered through my mind in quick, precise flashes. The night we cooked with every light off because the bulb had blown and we were too tired to replace it, laughing while the pasta stubbornly stuck. The afternoon we drove to the beach on a whim and came home sunburned and wind-hungry. The season we looked after a neighbor's elderly terrier and felt absurdly proud of keeping a schedule for someone else's tiny heart. Those images made the room feel like a museum of moments that had tried their best. When she reached the last lines, she covered her mouth. Tears blurred her lashes at once, not the showy kind, but the kind that sneak up when the body realizes a truth before the mind agrees. Her knees buckled slightly, and she grabbed the chair back like a climber catching a ledge. She didn't blame. She didn't bargain. She set the ring down carefully, almost reverently, and whispered, I didn't think you'd... I thought you'd just try harder. I did, I said gently. For a long time, but effort is not the same as respect. She nodded, tears spilling now, quiet as rain that starts without thunder. I said something cruel, she murmured. I said it to make you feel small because I felt small next to the life I thought I wanted. I keep moving the goalposts and then punishing you for not scoring. She sank into the chair and took a breath that sounded like surrender, not to me, but to reality. I pulled out the chair across from her. That letter isn't a performance, I said. It's a boundary. I'm not leaving to punish you. I'm leaving because I need to stop negotiating my worth. The letter laid out simple plans. I would stay with my brother for a while. We would divide chores and bills with fairness instead of friction. We would seek help if we truly aimed to rebuild, and we would stop humiliating each other in front of friends. No more comparisons, no more casual stabs disguised as jokes. It also asked for complete honesty about anything that touched our marriage. When I finished summarizing, Marina stared at the wood grain as if it were a map. If honesty is the price of staying human, she said slowly, I owe you more than I've been giving. She picked up her phone, stared at the screen, then set it down again with a tiny thud. There's something you should know. The air tightened. I didn't push. I didn't rescue. I waited. It started small, she whispered. Too small to seem dangerous, which made it more dangerous. She swallowed. After Jenny's party, Russ messaged to make sure I got home safe. He wrote flattering things about my job, paid attention like a spotlight. I was flattered. I told myself it was nothing, that he was just friendly. I let it become a habit. She looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen since our first year, when vulnerability came without calculation. It felt like stepping out of fog for an hour, and then I felt ashamed for 2 days, so I picked fights with you to make the shame look like anger. I breathed through the cold that spread in my chest. The stone in my gut shifted. Nothing. Major happened at first, she said. Lunches, long messages, walks after meetings. She paused, eyes shining with a courage that cost something. I crossed lines I told myself were fences because they looked tidy. I'm not going to narrate anything you didn't ask to hear, but I won't pretend it was innocent. The room hummed with the refrigerator and the distant traffic, everyday sounds that kept the world from tilting entirely. I thought of Jenny, of her easy laugh, of the way she turned ordinary gatherings into small holidays. Grief for her joined the ache for us, settling side by side like neighbors forced to share a bench. Thank you for saying it out loud, I said. It matters. She wiped her face with the heel of her palm. I wanted you to chase me, she confessed. I wanted to feel chosen without having to ask. When you kept being steady, I called it boring. When you worked late, I called it neglect. I was cruel because I was lost. Honesty doesn't undo history, but it changes the weather inside the room. I felt anger like a current, but it didn't control the wheel. I can't carry a secret that belongs to Jenny, I said. If we're going to stop lying, it has to be everywhere. She deserves to know. Marina nodded, jaw trembling. I'll tell her, she said. If you want to be there, be there. If you don't, I'll still say it. I'll be there, I said. This isn't about making a scene. It's about letting light in. She reached for the ring, touched it with 2 fingers, and then let her hand fall. Will you still go to your brother's? Yes, I said. Tonight. I stood, gathered a few clothes, a book, my grandfather's watch, and placed them in a small suitcase. She followed to the door, but didn't crowd me with last-minute promises. At the threshold, she whispered, I remember the first version of us. I don't know if we can reach them again, but I want to try honestly or end kindly. I met her eyes. Those are the only 2 options left. The hallway smelled faintly of laundry soap. I walked to the stairs feeling both lighter and older. My brother's place welcomed me with the clatter of a guitar pick and the calm of a friend who doesn't demand details. Stay as long as you need, he said, handing me a spare key. We watched a late game without talking about anything important. Silence that asks nothing can be a balm. In the morning, I ran along the river until my breath evened and my thoughts filed themselves into columns. What happened? What must happen next? What I can control. Under the last heading, I wrote 3 things on a napkin in a coffee shop. my choices, my tone, my integrity. Then I texted Marina. "Tell Jenny we'll meet wherever she prefers. I'll listen." She replied with a time and a small thank you that looked exhausted on the screen. That afternoon, before the meeting, I returned to our apartment to collect a few more items. Marina had left a note on the table beside the empty space where the letter had been. It wasn't a plea. It simply said, "I'm ready to tell the truth. I'll answer whatever you ask and won't ask you to protect my comfort. If there's a way through, it has to be clean." I slipped the note into my pocket and looked at the imprint the ring had left on my finger. Faint, like a pale line from the sun where a watch used to sit. The skin would fade back to even color in time. Marks do that when they stop being rubbed raw. When I reached the coffee shop, Jenny was already there, a cup cooling in front of her. She smiled automatically, then registered the seriousness on our faces and straightened. "What's going on?" she asked, voice steady, generous even in confusion. Marina inhaled, gathered herself, and opened her mouth to speak. That was where the first part of this story paused. At a small table, steam thinning above our cups, honesty finally stepping out of the fog and into the light where everyone could see what it cost and what it might save. Marina's voice trembled, but she didn't stop. The truth had already pushed past the door, and now it was spilling into the open. She admitted how the messages with Russ had started as playful, seemingly harmless, until they weren't. What felt like validation at first quickly became a rope she didn't know how to untie herself from. "I kept telling myself I could manage it," she said, her eyes red but steady. "But every day I let it go on, I chipped away at us." I sat across from her, watching the way her hands twisted together as though she were holding on to something that was already gone. Anger flared in me like dry wood catching flame, but I forced myself to stay still. Not because I wasn't furious, I was, but because explosions wouldn't undo what had already been done. I thought of Jenny, of her trust, her laughter, and how betrayed she would feel. The thought hurt almost as much as my own wound. "I need you to understand," Marina whispered, "that I wasn't comparing you because you weren't enough. I was comparing you because I was ashamed. It was easier to make you feel small than admit I was the one tearing us apart." She reached for the ring on the table, her fingers trembling above it. She didn't pick it up, she just stared. "When you left that letter, it was like you finally held up a mirror, and I saw myself." I leaned back, letting her words hang heavy in the room. For years I had carried the weight of being the steady one, the reliable one, the man who didn't make grand gestures but kept the lights on, the car running, the world balanced. I had thought that was enough. To me, it had been love. To her, it had become invisible. And now here we were, in the wreckage of unsaid words and reckless choices. "I can't pretend this didn't happen," I said, my voice low but clear. "I won't live in a marriage built on secrets and comparisons. You wanted me to be more like him. But look at what he gave you, a cheap thrill and a broken home. That's not manhood. That's cowardice. And you let yourself believe it was more." I didn't spit the words like venom, but each one landed with finality. Tears slid down her cheeks, but she didn't argue. For once, there were no excuses, no but-ifs, only silence, and in that silence the gravity of what we had lost. The next day, we met Jenny. It was Marina's choice to confess directly, but I stood beside her, not as her defender, but as a witness to the truth. Jenny listened without interrupting, her face shifting from confusion to shock to devastation. She held her coffee cup so tightly I thought it might crack. When Marina finished, Jenny set it down with shaking hands. Her voice was quiet, but sharp enough to cut the air. "You were in my house laughing with me, smiling with me, and all the while this?" She looked at me, her eyes wide with hurt. "You knew." "I found out when she told me," I said evenly. "That's why we're here. You deserve to know too. This isn't mine to hide." Jenny stood, unable to sit a moment longer. "I need air," she whispered. She walked out, shoulders stiff, and left us with the echo of a door that didn't slam but might as well have. On the walk back, Marina spoke in a voice that sounded small, childlike. "She'll never forgive me. She'll hate me forever." "Maybe she will," I said. "But forgiveness isn't owed. You don't get to decide how she heals. I paused, glancing at her. And as for me, I don't know what comes next, but I know I won't stay in a place where I'm measured against another man ever again. That chapter is over. That night, at my brother's apartment, I sat with my lists again. On one side, the things I'd need if we tried again. Boundaries, honesty, a marriage rebuilt on respect instead of resentment. On the other side, what I wanted if I walked away. Peace, self-respect, and freedom from being compared to someone who had already proven himself unworthy. The balance tipped as I wrote, the second list growing clearer, cleaner. 2 days later, Marina texted me. She had gone to counseling. She was writing every night, trying to untangle her choices. She didn't beg me to come home. She didn't send long apologies, just updates, each one ending with the same sentence. I'll understand if you can't forgive me. Forgiveness wasn't the point, though. The point was that I had found my voice again, after years of letting myself be measured and found wanting. For once, I wasn't asking how to be more like someone else. I was asking how to be myself, fully, without apology. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough. The coffee shop meeting had changed everything. After Jenny walked out, Marina seemed smaller, quieter, as if her voice had run out of places to hide. For the next week, I kept my distance, staying at my brother's place, running along the river in the mornings, and letting my mind breathe in ways it hadn't in years. I thought about revenge, what it usually meant, the kind that left people scorched and proud for a moment, then hollow. But real revenge, I decided, was simpler. It was living without shame, without bending yourself into shapes for someone who would never appreciate it. Marina sent me short messages every day, none of them pleading. She wrote about counseling, about the journal she was keeping, about how she couldn't walk past the kitchen table without hearing the sound of her own words echoing back at her. "Why can't you be more like him?" she had asked. Now, she confessed, every time she thought it, she saw the truth. Russ's face, Jenny's tears, and the wreckage of a friendship that would never be rebuilt. Jenny texted me once, too. Just one line. "Thank you for not letting me live in a lie." I didn't reply right away. I didn't want to say the wrong thing. Finally, I sent back, "You deserved better from both of them. I'm sorry you were hurt in this." She sent a heart emoji, nothing more. Sometimes silence is a boundary, and I respected it. A week later, Marina asked to meet at the park. We sat on a bench under the oak trees, the same place where we had once eaten melting ice cream on a hot July day, laughing as it dripped down our hands. This time, there was no laughter, only truth. "I know I can't undo it," she said. "I know I broke something that won't grow back the same. I just need you to hear me say it. I was wrong. You didn't deserve it. You gave me a safe life, a steady love, and I wanted drama. I thought drama meant passion, but it was just destruction dressed up as excitement." She took a shaky breath. "If you walk away now, I'll understand. I'll sign whatever papers you bring. But if there's even a chance you'd stay, I'd spend the rest of my life proving I see you, not a shadow of someone else. You." Her words were raw, but they didn't move me the way they once might have. I wasn't cold. I still cared for her. But care wasn't the same as trust. I thought about all the nights she had let me sleep beside her while her heart wandered elsewhere. I thought about the way she had looked at Russ as though he carried answers I never could. And I thought about myself, the man who had rediscovered he was enough, even standing alone. "I believe you're sorry," I said quietly. "I believe you've learned something from this. But I also know myself. And I know I can't live every day wondering if I'll be compared to the next man who flatters you. That's not love, it's a test I didn't sign up for." Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't argue. "So, this is goodbye?" "It's the only honest ending," I said. We sat in silence for a while, listening to children play in the distance, watching the wind bend the branches above us. Finally, I stood. She stayed sitting, staring at the ground, her shoulders curved like she was bracing for a storm. When I walked away, it wasn't triumph I felt. It was clarity. The kind of clarity you only get when you stop chasing validation from people who don't value what you quietly give. Marina had wanted me to be more like another man. My revenge was showing her and myself that I didn't need to be anyone but me. In the weeks that followed, I rebuilt piece by piece. I worked late not out of obligation, but because I enjoyed being good at what I did. I reconnected with old friends, the kind who reminded me of who I'd been before comparisons poisoned my home. I even signed up for a woodworking class, something I'd always wanted to try. The smell of cedar and the weight of tools in my hands gave me a new rhythm, one that belonged only to me. As for Marina, she moved out of the apartment into a smaller place across town. She sent me one last message after the divorce papers were signed. "I hope you find someone who never asks you to be anyone else." I didn't reply, but I wished her well in my heart. Months later, I ran into Jenny at the river path. She was walking her dog, her hair pulled back, her smile softer but still bright. We talked for a while, not about the past, but about books, travel, and the way life forces you to grow through pain you never asked for. There was no spark between us, not the kind Marina had feared. Just respect. Just the quiet relief of knowing we had both stepped out of shadows. And as the sun set over the water, I realized that the real revenge had already happened. Not in yelling, not in betrayal repaid with betrayal, but in this: standing tall, whole, and free, no longer shrinking beneath anyone's comparisons. For the first time in years, I felt entirely myself. And that was more than enough.